Hi, I'm Sarah Fromm, and I'm one of the assistants here at the archive at the Fort Collins Museum of Discovery. Today I'm going to be talking about Belva Cahill and the Cahill collection. The Cahill collection is roughly 5 file boxes in a scrapbook box, or 7 linear feet. Now, it really looks like someone donated to us the contents of an entire desk. There are receipts, bills, bank statements, and a surprising number of pens and pencils in this collection. Now, these are items that may not seem like they have much historical value on the surface, but they are exceptionally helpful at piecing together how the people of Fort Collins interacted with one another, and also in telling the story of a woman who, honestly, on the surface, didn't appear to do much, and we might otherwise be inclined to dismiss. Belva was born in Mexico, Missouri, nearest Columbia. Her parents were Gideon and Maggie Williams, and she had a much younger little brother named Clifford. The whole of the Williams family moved to Fort Collins in 1918, where Gideon, her father, was a painter and leader of the local painters union, and Maggie, her mother, was probably a housewife. In the 1919 city directory, Belva is listed as living at home with her parents and having a job as a cashier at Wolfer's Market, a grocery store owned by George Wolfer. George Wolfer started his grocery store in 1902, with the first store located on College, just south of the mountain. George ran the store with his son Claire and his stepson John Barry Cahill. The sons would continue to be business partners pretty much for the rest of their lives, continue to work in the grocery business together, and also serving on bank boards together. One wonderful thing about the Wolfer's Market is that you can see how grocery stores have changed over the 20th century, from small, behind-the-counter service to small aisles and grocery delivery. Here on the left, you can see a picture of John Barry standing in front of one of the counters of the grocery store wearing a white apron. These are photos that are from a bit later of the Wolfer grocery store from the 1930s and the 1950s, and there's also here an order pad from the Cahill collection. At that time, Wolfer's had expanded to a second store down near the college campus, and there's another picture of JB standing here next to the car on the right. Belva and JB probably met while working at the grocery store, as they were both listed as being employed there in 1919. But unfortunately, we don't know anything about their courtship. We don't know exactly when it started, we don't know how long it lasted, and we don't actually even know how conventional it was. Both Belva and JB were in their 20s, so they might have been less restricted by rules from their parents, and it was also the 19-teens, the 1920s, and there were changes in social expectations for how men and women were to behave with one another. Belva and JB married July 31st, 1921, and they honeymooned in Yellowstone. You can see on the lower right here an entry permit for Yellowstone, and it's absolutely fantastic to be able to tie an event from a collection into something that you can read about in the newspaper. On the left, you also have photos of JB and Belva. On the back, they are written that these photos were from before they were married. I'm unsure about this. They look more like honeymoon photos to me, but maybe that speaks to them being more of a modern couple, and since they weren't nearly so young when they got married, maybe they did more of what they wanted to. This is the very first photo I ever saw of Belva, and it was the one that made me decide that I had to learn more about this woman. I mean, Belva and JB here look like a young couple from Agatha Christie, perhaps even like Tommy and Tuppence, solving crimes together, or just living a married couple life. However, unlike Tommy, JB was actually a good businessman. Like many well-to-do couples in Agatha Christie, the Cahills traveled. Sometimes they flew, sometimes they went on cruises. They took a cruise to Alaska, but they often traveled by car, driving all over the country and keeping a gas log along the way. This page in this gas log here involves a trip north into Wyoming and west to Salt Lake, and the handwriting is Belva's. Perhaps Belva was the navigator, the map reader, and therefore the log maker as well. Home was also nice for the Cahills. They had their house built in the winter of 1931-1932, facing City Park. The landscaping plan for this house called for 500 tulips to be planted. We also have in our collection the book that they picked the paint colors from, and you can see a similar red echoed in the brickwork on the exterior of the house. Upon the completion of the house, JB placed a full-page ad in the newspaper. The first time I came across this, I thought it was exceptionally weird, an odd brag about his house, until I finally realized that it was an ad for local businesses and a call to support local companies during the worst years of the Depression. Belva and JB had 2 daughters, Shirley and Beverly. It's hard to know exactly what kind of relationship Belva had with her daughters, but it seems like from the evidence we have that Belva was the kind of mother that many mothers try to be loving and to provide her children with experience and opportunities that they themselves may not have had. Belva only managed to finish high school, but both her girls attended college and competed with the riding club. I find it very appropriate that the very first picture I saw of Belva reminded me of a character from Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie featured bridge in a lot of her works, and one of Poirot's murders is solved at the age of bridge scores. Bridge also was the card game of the 20th century. Everyone played bridge. And unlike other women we presented on, Belva wasn't involved much. She did some club activity, she did some volunteer work, but she didn't do a lot of it. It seems that she wasn't very outgoing like Liz Case, who Belva was probably an introvert. And unlike Carmen Johnson, who was a single mother with never-ending energy, Belva seemed like she had less. And it's very clear that Belva had the means and the support to live a quieter and less busy lifestyle, which meant she played a lot of bridge. Belva could live this life of relative leisure. She was still a mother, and motherhood is hard work, even if you have help, because she was married to a successful businessman. JB owned grocery stores, had multiple rental properties in town. He owned the Northern Hotel in the 1930s. In the 1950s, he owned the Armstrong Hotel. JB was also involved with the First National Bank, served in various positions like director and vice president, along with his brother Claire. And this is really where the Cahill collection starts to show how the people of Fort Collins interacted with one another. Through the receipts, through things like bank statements and deposited checks, we get to know things about people in Fort Collins. I mean, obviously, Belva banked at the First National Bank because her husband worked there, but how often do we actually end up knowing the reason why someone picked a bank? These checks and deposit slips and other items tell how a woman like Belva spent her money and in turn spent her time. They answer those questions of what kind of person did this business serve? Who read these magazines? So Belva probably got her hair done at Varra's, but she most definitely got her hair done at Patty's beauty shop regularly, as there were checks to them quite frequently. In the 1970s, after JB's death, Belva shopped at Thriftway, the grocery store at Mountain Shields where Beaver's Market currently is, and it's very close to City Park. And that guess probably could have been made by looking at maps, but now you know because of receipts from the store. And that's the same thing about the magazine subscription lists. It's one thing to read about circulation numbers, and another thing to put identity to the kind of reader that these magazines were reaching. Belva is a tough subject to highlight for a presentation, especially if you're going to compare her to the outgoing and involved Liz Case or the highly capable Carmen Johnson, women whose works we can trace around Fort Collins and over decades. Belva was also married to a man, and we would traditionally turn to a man to tell the tale of Fort Collins' growth and development. And it's very easy to find things about JB and his buildings and his hotels and his work in the newspapers. But Belva was a housewife and a mother, and even though she was one of privilege, these stories are hard to tell. You often only get snapshots or hazy outlines of women's work. But I think one of the important things about this collection is because of its mundaneness, because of its receipts and its checks and its cards from beauty salons, is that you get a sense of the everyday people. You get a sense of grounding behind some of the big scale history. This here is a pile of bills from the gas company, and Belva has scribbled and doodled all over the backs of several of them. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because she called the company and had to wait while they went to find a paper. But there is something, universal about having time with a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. You will doodle. That is what people do. And that is one of the things that I love about Belva and this collection, is that it shows that people continue to live. They continue to go about their lives just like everyone else.